Welcome to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast, where we seek to further equip you for the work of ministry by discussing a variety of biblical, theological, and practical topics. Stick around until the end of the episode to learn how you can submit a question for us to answer on the podcast. Welcome back to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. My name is Toby Baxley, and I'm joined in studio today by Frederick Murray Van Gundy and John Christopher McKnight, our faithful co-hosts. And
what about you?
So
Toby,
my name is
Tony Baxter.
No, I just go by my first name. You guys must be in witness protection.
Well, what's your middle
or
name?
something.
At least say your full name.
Lynn. I'm Toby Lynn Baxley.
Toby Lynn Baxley.
Yeah. I don't go by Lynn. I don't go by
that
Leonard.
Kind of country.
I don't go by anything else. And it's just Toby. It's not Tobias. I'm not hiding anything.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I am.
We'll learn about that on Saturday at the counseling seminar.
Hiding.
How much we're all hiding.
Yeah. Just bucket loads of insecurity. Yeah.
I'm insecure today because I'm not even really sure who the host is. Because you introduce yourself as the host, but we're piggybacking off of last week where Murray was the host. And it's his topic.
I was the topic host.
He's the topic host.
He's
I'm
the podcast host.
I'm the meta host.
We're the
meta host.
That's right.
So what am I today? Because it's like my turn.
You're micro, not macro.
But it's your topic.
You're like a tertiary host.
Seriously,
you piggybacked on
you
Murray's
cheated. You cheated
topic,
and said I'm gonna use.
I feel like you phoned it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you
definitely don't have
Speaking
anything
of,
else to.
I'm reading the questions.
I don't have anything else to say,
I have
so
nothing else to say. I'm just going to.
Let's break this up into 2 weeks, so I don't have to think about anything next week.
I'm using that one next time.
I'm tired of making decisions. I don't even like making the lunch decision. It just weighs on me. It starts weighing on me the day before.
Second worst part, actually.
I start stressing out.
Lunch decisions.
Because you've had some total flops, and it's like the pressure of it is growing when you do that to us. So.
Last week when the place you chose was closed. Yeah. Well, I mean, on the upside, we did end up at HEB Barbecue, which
Toby would have chosen.
Fine. Which was fine.
What are some blind spots or weaknesses, and what are we doing about them? How do we keep from just cruising or becoming complacent? That's where we are in our two-part podcast.
Yeah.
This is the second half of Murray's questions from last week. We've thoroughly covered the strengths, I feel like, the greatness and glory and wonder of all things KBC. And now we're moving on to blind spots and weaknesses. And so my first thought on this, and I think you used the word uncomfortable last week, that this second half of this makes me feel uneasy. I just want to confess as we begin, there's an uneasiness because it's like calling a family meeting and saying, okay, family, we're going to talk about everybody's weaknesses.
Everything we're doing wrong. Yeah.
What are we all doing wrong? Let's talk about it. And so, it just feels like a little uneasy to start talking about the family weaknesses in this family meeting.
Maybe we can pitch it like the Apostle Paul did and just say these are areas where we can excel still more.
Yes.
Or when when you're filling out a job interview or something that says, well, tell us your weaknesses, you actually state them in a way that they actually are strengths.
They're strengths.
They're actually strengths.
I love the line, my only weakness is I'm a perfectionist.
I actually care too much.
Exactly. I care too much. I love too much.
I get too invested.
I'm too invested.
Right.
For sure.
No. But I think where can we improve? I think that's what we're really looking at.
We won't call them weaknesses. We'll just say, where can we do better?
Where can we do better? So as I think about this, and I'm going to use the word weakness for just a couple more moments, it's really interesting to me because our strengths are also our weaknesses. Our strengths of our 9 elders are 4 pastors. I'll just talk about myself. If I'm a strength to this church, I'm also a weakness to this church. And you're a weakness, because we're weak, and we're flawed, and we're broken, and we're incomplete, and we're inadequate, and we're all in process. And it's like, wait a minute, the weakness of KBC is KBC. Like, we're our biggest problem. Is that not true? I mean, theologically, isn't the man in the mirror the problem? And And so I was kind of just thinking about this. We're all limited. I just think the three of us here today, we're all limited. We all have our quirks. We all have our inadequacies, our insecurities.
Why don't you name a couple of those?
No, I'd like to just keep it general.
Why don't you name a
We're
couple?
all very modest in our gifting. We're all gifted, but we're modest in our gifting. You know, we all are in Romans 7. Is that not? I mean, don't we live there?
Yeah.
I don't do what I want to do. I do the things I don't want to do. Wretched man that I am. Who will deliver me? You know, I think we've talked about that some.
Yeah, we're all being sanctified.
We're all being there.
We're not living in a glorified state.
Yeah, and so I think when you get right down to church weakness, the strengths can become the weakness, and the weakness is that we're all imperfect and we're all in process. And if we were all just better Christians, then we would be a better church. Yeah. And I'll even take it closer to home for myself. Maybe I'm getting too reflective on the eve of my 25th anniversary here. Probably will become too reflective at some point. But in one ways, I would say I'm trying to be objective. It's not boasting. I could step back and say, man, if you've got a church that's healthy and there's been a pastor there for a long time, that's a strength. That's a good thing. There's stability there. There's longevity. That says a lot about that person. It says a lot about his wife. It says a lot about the church. It says a lot about God's grace, all those things, right? I would always affirm that. When I look at ministries from afar, MacArthur or Piper, these guys that are long-term in one place, I would say that's a strength and that's a blessing to that church and on and on. But I would also say, and this is where I'll just make it about, just me for a moment. It's a strength that I've been here as long as I've been here. It's also a weakness that I've been here as long as I've been here. Because a church starts to really, the longer a person is in that role, the more the church begins to reflect both strengths and weaknesses, humanly speaking, of its leadership. And so as I step back and look at the weaknesses of KBC, I become uneasy because the way I see the weaknesses of our church are actually my own weaknesses. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so there's a layer of meaning here of there is a weakness to the church that I've been here as long as I've been here. And I often think, and I had this conversation with Kim a week or so ago, and she talks me off the cliff and, off the ledge. And she always, but I often think, man, the next, whenever that happens, the next person in this role needs to be completely different from me, personality-wise. But the next person needs to be an extrovert. They need to be very relational. Because I think that's what's going to be needed for this church to go from wherever we are, humanly speaking, to whatever's next. Mm-hmm. And that could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years. I don't know when it's going to be. I'm not. This is not a retirement speech. Yeah. But just reflecting on all this topic that you've brought to us. Those are where my mind went.
It's very interesting though, because the tendency for a church, I think, is trying to find a one-for-one replacement for the guy that just retired, right? Yeah. When MacArthur retires, they want to find somebody that's almost a carbon copy of him, just younger. But yeah. We think we need to shore up those right. blind spots and weaknesses.
This church has had 3 pastor teachers or 3 lead pastors in its entire history, and I would be willing to say, I don't know the other 2 guys super well, but I would be willing to guess that all 3 have been quote unquote introverts by way of personality. I know the first one was very much a professor, studious, Bible, doctor, and all that stuff. And it's great. That was God used him to kind of establish the foundation for us. I sense this about the second pastor who was here 10 years. From what I've heard, stories. I again didn't know him well, but kind of more of the same. And so I would also say that the 3 lead pastors of this church have been very low on the gifting of evangelism. I think that would be probably down the scale for all 3 of us. And so
kind of trickles
lo
down,
and behold, what is the weakness of our church? Evangelism.
Yeah, it trickles down. But I would say when you just talking about yourself and talking about the next person, I don't know that I agree with you on that. That they need to be completely different and all that. I think that our church, and I think this is partly you're to blame in a good way, Chris. I don't think our church really follows a personality here. I don't think we're a personality church. I don't think that, no doubt, people see you as the lead teaching pastor of this church, and that comes with a great responsibility. And like we've said, in ministry settings, you're involved in a lot more than, I'm not ever sitting in a counseling meeting with Toby and somebody. He's having you, and if I have a situation, I'm calling you, and then the church at large is, yes, they should be going to their shepherding pastor and all that stuff, but then it still kind of the buck stops a little bit with you. But I say that I in my experience in church, in the 28 years as a Christian, I would say that this setting could lend itself very much to, when Chris retires, the church is going to split in half. The new guy is going to come in and he's got no chance. So then it's the next guy that actually has a chance. I don't see that in this church. I really don't. I don't
see that.
Yeah, I see that yes, this church loves you and respects you and looks up to you and sees you as our teaching pastor, but they see the bigger purpose of the church, that Jesus really is the head of this church, right? And you're one of the called individuals. You're the first amongst equals and all that stuff. And I really see that in our church, which is great.
Yeah.
Which is great. I don't know that that's what you were saying, but
no, I don't disagree with any of that. I just see that I think to fundamentally address what is probably the primary weakness of this church, we'll take someone who is more gifted in evangelism, more relational, more extroverted. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
A Mark Dever type versus a John Piper, John MacArthur type. This when I went to Grace Church and sat down with a person who was very much in the inner circle, and we were at a lunch, and the conversation of MacArthur came up, and he was about the age I am now then.
MacArthur was.
Yeah, he's in his 50s, and this person was closer to my age, and I don't even know how it came up. Maybe it was like, what are his weaknesses? Because from afar, this man looks like, the perfect Christian. It seemed, and so and it wasn't like a guy was slamming him. He just said, "I just really wish he was more relational." That's all he said. And I heard another member of the church say, "I just wish our pastor would smile more from the pulpit, and not just be so serious all the time, and be more friendly." This was just a rank and file church member at Grace Church that we stayed with when we first moved there, and so, I think. That's a weakness I have in my life personally. It's a burden I bear. It's a besetting sin. I struggle with it all the time, just being friendly, being outgoing, being relational, all those things. And so that's got to be shored up somehow by others in the body, on the staff, in the elder room, somewhere, somehow. That is a hole in my holiness and has to be shored up by others. You have holes in your holiness that has to be shored up by others. So do you, et cetera. We all have them, and those. I just know what
makes
mine
up
are.
the body of Christ, right? Which is fantastic,
right? So I salivate when we're doing a new members interview, and I'm sitting there thinking, this person has a gift of evangelism. We need that in our church, and I think it's just a handful of people that have it.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's also the going back to last week is a strength of our pastoral staff is that we're all kind of similar, but we all complement each other in those weaknesses. Definitely. And also in our elder group, we've got the more outgoing, friendly, hospitable people that kind of come alongside us and make up for those weaknesses. Mm-hmm. But I just going back to what you said, I heard it said that every gift has a dark side, every gift has a side effect. Mm-hmm. And so someone with a high teaching gift may not always be the most relational and hospitable. Right. And someone with if like me with being a little bit more creative. I don't do administration all that well, and so I need all the help that I can get as well. And so, yeah, as a church, we have our strengths have side effects. Our strength as being, we hold the Bible to a very high, we put the Bible on a very high pedestal.
It's in our name. It's our middle name. Yeah. It's our middle name.
And sometimes we can come across as kind of cold.
Yeah.
And I think by God's grace and in who He has sent here, we are increasing in our friendliness, in our kind of outgoing friendliness. But I mean, even that, there's still growth to happen there.
Room for improvement.
Yeah.
Here's my other bullet point list of areas needing improvement. Marriages need improvement. Parenting needs improvement. Prayer of just our members in general. Prayer life needs improvement, and then local outreach / evangelism. That's what I came up with this morning. What do you guys have as far as weaknesses to answer the question that you posed? And
just kind of on a very broad general scale would be evangelism outreach, but then how do we address that? What's the solution to that weakness or needing improvement? And then I would say the idea of generational disciple making, which is being addressed, I think, at the church. And I'm not saying I came in and did anything. The idea, the concept, the strategy of intentional generational disciple making versus just the general word discipleship. So I think it's being addressed. I think it just needs to always be on the forefront. I think we stop short in our idea of this discipleship. We stop short of reproduction. And even within this room, it might be like, well, yeah, I don't, how does that look? What does that mean? And so I think that would be something that we constantly keep in front of us, that we're not just takers, receivers of the word, and, lack of a better description, pew potatoes, getting fat on the word, getting fat even with your person who's discipling you. Like, man, I've spent 20 years with this person, man. It's unbelievable. I grew so much. And then I go to heaven,
Right.
You're awesome. So versus like, man, I want to be equipped to then be a reproducer in all aspects. So I would say, yeah, just I think right away, if asked, if our church were polled, they would say, and they would have some kind of aspect of evangelism and outreach would be an answer. I think would be highest, I would guess.
Yeah. It's such a temptation too in a church that has good teaching and a lot of it, to just sit and get involved in all the intake opportunities I can get involved in, all the Bible studies and book clubs, and I'm here every Sunday and I hear the preaching, and I go and I listen to that sermon over and over again throughout the week, and then what? What's the output? What are you doing with that? You can take it in, you can process it, but then what are you doing with it? And if it's nothing, if you're not doing anything with it, then you're a hearer only and not a doer of the word, and you're stagnant. You're really stagnant. It doesn't matter how much you take in. Really, what keeps water from being stagnant is what flows out. What flows out of that pond. If nothing's flowing out of that pond is only breeding death, really, And so that's not I wouldn't say that's a weakness, but it's a temptation. It's definitely can be a tendency that we have to watch out for, is not just completely just soaking it up, but pushing it out. And that's through evangelism and outreach. That's through being a witness. It's one of our pillars. Witness to Christ, witness among where we work, who we interact with.
And I would say there's a lot of that going on that we just don't know about,
For sure.
as just church members who love Jesus and want people to know Jesus, and they're doing it, and we just don't know about it. So I would definitely say that's happening, and for lack of a better term, organically, and that's awesome, and that's how it should be, really, ultimately. As a church, if we were just to look at our church, ministries maybe of our church, maybe we could just say that, right? We look at our church, here's the ministries that we do. I would say we're light or weak on the evangelism outreach side, right? And so then what do? Do you add a ministry, right? You could be a church. We know of churches in town. We've been part of churches that are high out. I mean, it's outreach, it's all outreach and just very little foundation, very little Bible, right? So how can we maybe get a little stronger in our outreach and evangelism and reaching the community without becoming some kind of a social gospel, And
I think too, it helps us to, it's going on informally through work and family relationships and all that. And we can't judge that. We can't gauge that. We can't measure it. We don't even know what it is. That would be like knowing what people's individual prayer life is like. Really only the Lord knows. But I don't want us to overlook the fact that we have had and we do have community outreach. We have Bible clubs in 4 or 5 elementary schools.
That's great,
have done for years and years and years. And so that's outreach to mostly unchurched kids, mostly kids that are not part of our church. Some of them are sometimes, but that's not been the general rule of thumb. We have outreach with Wednesday night. We have a lot of non-members here on Wednesday night, whether it's our children's program or formerly Awana, now KBC Kids, whether it's junior high and high school youth. How many of the kids that are part of those two groups are not church member kids, right? That's so by definition, that's outreach. You guys as high schoolers go out into the community, right? Nearly every Wednesday night. You do something by way of either service or evangelism, something that's a touch point with quote unquote the community, whatever that means.
For sure.
I'm often plagued by this. We need to have community outreach. And my first thought, what is that?
Yeah, what is that?
What is that? And so, but I don't want us to not acknowledge that there has been and there are things going on out there beyond just people's individual Christian lives. Mm. Now, there's some ideas. Kim and I had this discussion. I said, hey, we're doing this podcast, Strengths and Weaknesses, and we talked about it a little bit, and we have before, and, she had some ideas, and we're going to pursue one of those in particular that might end up on a whiteboard, as it would be nothing but outreach. It won't be anything that's going to happen for us. It'll be for others, and it could be a whiteboard ministry. That I hope will happen. So stay tuned.
You're not mentioning it.
Stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned.
I had it on my added agenda last night, but we didn't get to it. Okay. It's not time sensitive, so I saved it. Yeah, I need to get elder approval just to make sure there's no hiccup there. But so there's some ideas out there that we can pursue. And we've done some things. We do the Christmas box. The Operation Shoebox. That's community. That's big community. That's the whole world. And we are the gathering center for that. And, that's quote unquote community involvement. What else are we doing? Have we done? There's things out there that could go on that list, but you got to help us, Murray. You're the community, you're the outreach guy. Man. You're the mission trip guy.
Well, we're trying to do it. I mean, we're doing it.
How do we incorporate what the youth are doing even on an adult level? So.
I mean, without it becoming programmatic, I don't know. I don't know. Without it being something that you literally like, and you mentioned this to me before, Chris, that we've actually done this, but my talk about evangelism and using the EvangeCube over the last couple years, sparked some people coming up to me and saying, "Hey, man, I would love to learn how to use the EvangeCube. I'd love to learn how to evangelize better. Like, is there anything we could do?" And I think you had mentioned at some point during that time period that we've done that before, where we've had, a 6-week course on evangelism or something like that.
Right.
And I've been a part of those before. I've gone out. We've literally, the number one thing when it comes to evangelism, in my experience, in any kind of classroom training or whatever, the number one way for it to stick and for you to really learn is called OJT,
That's right?
On-the-job training. When you actually go do it, that's when the rubber meets the road, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when you cross that threshold of the nervousness and the inadequacy and all that. So if you don't do that, just having a class on evangelism will fall short anyway. Right. But then you do something where it includes, okay, now we've done 4 weeks of classroom training. Now we're actually going to go out. Now you got to go out. Yeah. Now you got to have people who are willing to go out, and you got to have people who are trainers who are willing to take people out and say, "Let me show you how I do it," and then you can follow along. And I mean, that is like, woo, that makes your mouth dry. That makes your palms sweat and your hair stand up on the back of your neck. We're like, all right, we're getting in the vehicles. We're driving. Where are we driving? Well, we're going to go to an apartment complex and knock on doors. Oh my gosh!
Right.
I've done it. I've been on both sides of it. And so part of me is like, is that the method of helping people become better evangelists? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know.
Do we need a pastor of evangelism?
No.
Okay.
No,
well, that's quick.
Unless he was broad. He's going to have a lot more than just be pastor. He would have to be over disciple making, missions, evangelism, something like that. Yeah,
we don't even need to pitch that to the elders. Murray's already against it.
So veto is already happened. So, Grace Church for years, I don't know if they're still doing it. For years and years, Grace Church had a ministry. We had to go through it as part of the seminary curriculum called Discipleship Evangelism, DE. And it was a kind of a spin-off from EE.
Yeah, so I did EE.
Yeah, and they wanted to take EE and make it more geared toward discipleship. Yeah. Switched it up. But what the mechanism, though, the method was Tuesday night, people that went through the training came to the church and got visitor card information and went to the people who turned in cards.
Yeah. Like showed up at their house.
They'd call them. They would call them and say, we would like to come visit you in 1 hour, in 30 minutes.
And because the person at least did the card, they opened up enough of a door to say, we've done that
and
before.
So that's an idea. We could do that here.
We did that. We did that when we were at a church in Tennessee. The very first church that we were involved in, Two Rivers Baptist Church, right over there across from Opryland.
Right.
And on Tuesday or Wednesday night, every Sunday school class would go out and visit people who turned in visitor cards. And it was a very rich time.
Yeah.
I love training people how to evangelize.
Right.
I love it.
More than evangelizing?
I love evangelizing when I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But just doing it on my own and going evangelize, that's not going to happen much, right? I wouldn't say zero, but not much. But training people to evangelize, and then obviously I'm the one doing it, showing and demonstrating before delegating. I just love it. I mean, I love it. I love it the most in our mission trainings for our short-term mission trips. I love it the most.
Okay.
And
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to give you an assignment right now, a public assignment as your supervising pastor. You've got to bring the Evangel Cube to the next elders meeting and teach us how to use it.
Okay. Yeah.
That'll be our Devo for the July elders. Is that fair?
Yeah, sure. And Evangel Cube is just one method, right? We would use the EE as the 2 diagnostic questions, right? You use them all the time, Chris. Of if you died today, do you know for sure you'd go to heaven? If you did die and stood in front of God, and He said, "Why should I let you in heaven?" What would you say? So those are diagnostic questions. But I love it. I love doing evangelism training. I don't know why. I just love it. Maybe it scratches the insecurity of myself and of not doing it more. So it's like,
challenging yourself.
It's a reason, so to speak.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, I love it. And then going and doing it and then coming back and sharing stories, man, that when we do it for youth, we probably do it once or twice a semester for our youth ministry. And then we come back and have a little 10-minute debrief. Right. And the stories you hear just, and the students, like, just to see they are like, I would never do that. And then they do it and they're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing.
Right.
I love that.
I think there's two areas that when we're talking about evangelism and discipleship, because I think they kind of go hand in hand. I think there's 2 areas that we might be overlooking in instead of just going out. We don't have to go, canvass the Walmart parking lot on a Wednesday night to do evangelism. There's a couple spots, and one is just hospitality. Having people in our homes, and what Rosaria Butterfield calls it radical radically ordinary hospitality. Just radically, not meaning like way out there, but just at the root level. The word radical means root level, right? So radically ordinary hospitality. It's just like, this is just a normal part of our time, is we have people in our home and we invite people around our table. We're going to talk about the things of God. We're going to talk about things that are important, and we're going to feed you, and people think too much when we're talking about hospitality. We get hospitality and entertaining kind of conflated.
Intentional hospitality.
Intentional hospitality is not the same as entertaining, because if you're thinking, oh, my house is not clean enough, or my house is not nice enough, and I'm not a good cook enough, I think you're thinking actually in the terms of entertaining. But when you're talking about, I want to be a blessing to you, and that's hospitality. I want to invite you to my house and share a meal with you. And I just want to invite you into the normal rhythm of my week. Yeah, that's hospitality. But entertaining is almost I want to do this so you see how good I am. And so that's what people kind of reject. But I think we're missing out on this hospitality. But I think this hospitality also overflows into Sunday morning. I heard from some church members I was visiting yesterday who were doing greeting ministry, and the greeting ministry is great. You're greeted when you come through the door. You're greeted sometimes halfway between the door and your car. We've got good greeters at the doors, and then sometimes, but when you get in the door, you're sort of on your own if you're a new person. What happens then? And I've read books on church, and Tom Rainer was one that was really good. I can't remember the book that I read. I was on my study break or sabbatical.
Who moved my pulpit?
Who moved my pulpit? But 7 Confessions of a Church Member, or I Am a Church Member. Yeah. And they say that the hardest time for a visitor is actually when they find their seat. And nobody talks to them then. You might get greeted at the door, but then if you find a seat, you might just be left there to kind of stare awkwardly at the bulletin or around, and nobody talks to you. And so I think that's an area of hospitality that we're missing out on, is greeting people inside the worship center and helping the young mom to know where the cry room is and where the children's ministry is, and what happens when her baby starts crying and she doesn't know, like, what do I do? I mean, I'm trying to comfort this baby, but she's not quieting down. I either have to leave, just get in my car and leave, or just sit here awkwardly and hope my baby stops crying. No, we've got places for you, and be proactive about that. And that's not a greeter ministry. That's a everybody ministry. Right. If you're a member of this church, you need to know what those resources are. You need to know where the children's building is. You need to know who's sitting at the desk over there, and maybe walk them over there and introduce them. But also to introduce yourself to somebody that you haven't met before, and get over the awkwardness of saying, "Hey, are you new here?" And they're like, "I've been here for 20 years." And I'm like, "Well, good for you. I've been here for 20 minutes," and so just that sort of hospitality. And that's also, those conversations can lead to evangelistic opportunities.
Well, I think you bring up a really, really good point, Toby, is that, so when I talk about, or we are talking about just evangelism and kind of this cold call, street ministry, open air, whatever it might be, high uncomfortability evangelism that I say I love to do and train people. That's a level of evangelism that is not going to be very comfortable for very many people, right? Yeah. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it and get kind of feel that out a little bit, and it's going to help them in their relational evangelism, because I love that you bring that up. It's almost this intentional hospitality. If we're intentional as the believer inviting people into our home, we know we want this to lend itself to this person knowing Christ. Either, it's not necessarily the first visit, but it's very relational. So I think that is so key, because what you just described, way more people can do and are way more comfortable with than saying, okay, hey, we're going to gather at KBC and now we're going to go
then the SWAT
cold
team.
call. Exactly. And so that fits more people. I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, we're not going to do that. I think there's multiple layers to what we're talking about here, which is even the person sitting in church in the pew as a Christian at Kerrville Bible Church. You see them, and what you do with that can really dictate a lot of that person's life, right?
Yeah, it's hard for me.
Yeah.
It's hard for me as the worship, as I'm leading worship, to see somebody come in and be obviously looking for a place to sit and stand there awkwardly. And that's an usher. That's an usher function, but we can all be an usher.
It's a Christian function.
You can see somebody is searching for a place to sit, and you can say, "Hey, come here, I'll help you," and walk down that aisle and say, "Oh, here's a couple spots."
Yeah, and we have people in our church that do that, which is awesome. That really have eyes to see that. Yeah. But we also have a very large group of people in our church that have and this is not a dig on an individual. I would never say a name. I don't even know if I have a name. Is we're consumeristic. Right? When we come it's the junior high kid walking into the cafeteria for the first time is like, where am I going to sit? Right? Mm-hmm. And so adults do that. Adults walk into the sanctuary and they go, where am I going to sit? Or I'm going to go to my pew where I am and I'm going to hunker down, right? I'm going to hunker down and get my reserved spot for 15 minutes. And versus, man, if we just do a better job of having eyes to see that there are people who are walking in here who are uncomfortable, who are that junior high kid walking into the cafeteria wondering, where do I sit?
Yeah. Would we be that person that would say, hey, come sit with me?
Right. And there are people in our church that do a good job of that, but I think we could do better.
Yeah. It's a challenging situation because if we're standing and we're singing, and you have the of all of us, you have the vantage point of seeing this, it's really challenging for everybody involved. One, we're supposed to be singing and worshiping, and so our focus is somewhere else. So I may not even actually notice the person.
Yeah.
Two, it's really hard to know where the gaps are when we're all standing.
When we're standing, it is hard to see.
Yeah,
the
once
gaps
we've started that, we're too far past it.
And if the choir's in the choir loft, and we know, and they've got their little spots saved all over the place, so it becomes this. It's challenging for the person in the pew who should be scooting over. It's challenging for the person that walks in to visually see a spot. It's almost like I've got to wait until we sit down to even know where there's spots, I think the real frustration, whether it's yours or other people who witness this, is where there are spots beside you in the pew and you could scoot over and let people in and you don't. Mm-hmm. Now that's what's got to change. That's just being inhospitable at that point. It's like, I want to stay in my spot. I want to stay on the end. I want to stay hunkered down when really I should sacrifice and scoot in and say, here's the spot,
Yeah.
And so we all, and I'd be the world's worst. I mean, you all see where I sit,
you kick
Nobody wants to sit next to you, though.
So you kick Bo out, but he's second row, baby. He's right behind you.
People want their space, They don't want it. They don't want people touching them. They don't want to. They don't want that spot taken up, and so. There's a lot going on here. We're talking about this dynamic, and we've tried all kinds of stuff to scoot over, and we're really not crowded right now between the fellowship hall and the worship center. There's room in the balcony. There's room, and we're not really stuffed in here right now, and yet it still seems to be a problem.
It does look crowded though on the floor level.
Right.
From Sunday to Sunday, it can look crowded. Yeah. But I get what you're saying about it's hard to find the gaps when people are standing.
Yeah, once it started, but I think what you're addressing is that first 15 minutes, from 10:15 to 10:30 of somebody coming in, and you know what I mean? And that's where we really need to be cognizant as a church to see those people, right?
But here's the thing, from 10:15 to 10:30, the extroverts are in the foyer talking, and the introverts come in because they don't want to talk.
They don't want to talk.
They want to sit. They want to think. They want to pray. They want to, and it's just wow. It's an interesting thing, and there'll be somebody come in and sit right there in the pew in front of them that they've never seen before, and they won't engage them, and they should. I agree with you. They absolutely should.
Yeah. Look for somebody.
Look for somebody.
If you're listening to this podcast, look for somebody to say hi to this Sunday.
There you go.
Somebody new.
What other? I think we've pounded evangelism and outreach enough. Any other weaknesses that came to mind for you guys when you thought of the questions, when you saw his questions? Anything else we ought to try to address?
No, I've vented all my frustration. No, it's not frustration. Just excel still more.
Be more hospitable. Be more welcoming, more friendly. I agree. I mean, that's the 90%, 95% of the people would say friendly church, but we do get, every so often, we get the comment, unfriendly church.
Yeah.
We get the comment, no one talked to me.
Yeah. And it's possible.
It's possible.
It's possible to have come through the whole
thing.
Hour and a half process and have not been talked to.
Now, at the same time, that's a two-way street because
Sure.
Usually unfriendly people find everybody else to be unfriendly.
Yeah.
You know, if you come in looking grumpy, arms crossed, you project.
Avoiding,
I don't want
eye contact.
I don't want to talk.
That's right.
Then that's probably what you're going to get.
Right.
But let's say this, the excel still more. Hey, let's rise above that as a church. Let's still engage that person.
Yeah.
The grumpiest looking, most uncomfortable, let's still go out of our way to try to break that ice.
Yeah.
And see what happens. So, all right. Yeah. Are we done?
It's painless.
Painless, 12:15.
Yeah, painless.
Nothing. Here we are. And we're done for 6 weeks. We'll be back in August.
Lord willing.
Lord willing. If the church is still on planet Earth
and
we're all still alive, we will be here. I'll close in prayer. Lord, thank you for Kerrville Bible Church. Thank you for raising it up and sustaining it these many years. Thank you for current leadership you've given to this church. Help us to steward this responsibility well. Lord, as we've talked about evangelism, outreach, and hospitality, help us as individuals in a church to excel still more. Help Toby, help Murray, help Chris to be better evangelists, to do the work of an evangelist. As Paul told Timothy, help us to be more relational on Sunday mornings, be more friendly. Myself, Lord, I'm at the front of the line. I need the most help of anybody in this church, no doubt. I pray you would help us to this end, and you'd grow your church. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for listening to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. We want to be a resource for you and answer the questions that are on your mind. Please send them to us via email at questions@kerrvillebiblechurch.org or call or text us at 830-321-0349.